So, time for even less editing than I usually do. You're just going to be seeing me playing Bloodborne for a bit here. I don't think it's really worth me trying to edit together a video on this topic, because it's really just going to be a stream of consciousness sort of thing regarding the backlash towards The Last of Us 2, and precisely the character of Abby. Now, I think a lot of the backlash towards The Last of Us 2 is less to do with the game itself and more to do with this sort of mix of what it represents to a lot of people. You've got, like, I'm mostly going to try and stick to addressing stuff I feel is what people are actually saying. I'm sorry, if someone wants to throw out a big list of actual criticisms and insist that's what people are talking about, I'm fine with trying to address those, but this is the impression I get from checking out people's various Twitter threads and the discussions, and I know these are shithole, but whatever. It's a fair amount of this stuff seems to be people's legitimate opinions. I also trying to focus not too much on the Chinese whispers aspect of the whole discussion. Let me just bring up some things people keep bringing up and hopefully are dead by now. No, Neil Druckmann does not put himself in a sex scene with Abby. No, you do not kill a pregnant woman in frontline combat. Once again, both of these are these weird little Chinese whispers effect where Neil Druckmann has like a character who might be modelled after him, but he doesn't have a sex scene. There's a sex scene in the game. It doesn't concern him. Somehow that meant he was in it and people were going on about that for a while. Yeah, you kill a pregnant woman. It's edgy. I'm not so that surprised. Didn't shock me all that much. No, it's not in this goofy-ass Wolfenstein 2 style assault. It's a completely different scenario. I'm sure I can think of more things people have been saying which didn't end up in the game. Jeez, I remember at some point people said the sex scene came at the very end, just so they could kind of... I don't know, I'm just throwing those out there very quickly so I don't have to go address like complete misinformation. So I think part of it is The Last of Us 2, I'm going to make a bet and say it has a decent shot of picking up some Game of the Year awards. Whether it's deserved or not, I think is a pretty subjective sort of thing. I'm personally going to say if it takes it for me, I won't at all be surprised. There's not a ton else coming out I'm looking forward to that much. But blah blah blah, people have different opinions. I think the issue is really that a lot of people just, there's kind of like, it's like when you had Shadow of Mordor winning Game of the Year, and I was like, that's kind of ridiculous. It's just a somewhat better than average Assassin's Creed alike. Or you had I don't know, Dragon Age 3 getting the VGA's Game of the Year, and once again, it's like I haven't played Dragon Age 3, so I have no idea if it was any good, but I got the impression it was sort of considered a disappointment next to the first game at least, but whatever. Point is, it's kind of this backlash against big Western games always grabbing the big awards. Now, in my view, there hasn't been like a great Japanese title this year I'd put my hat on as the definite best title this year. Last year you had some competition. This year, no, not really. I'm sure people have their favourites, and I'm not saying you're inherently wrong if you prefer Persona 5 or Final Fantasy 7 Remake or Resident Evil 3, but for me, I don't care at all about Persona. I think it's kind of a boring series, and the other two I was just fairly positive about, but not... I felt there was a lot of things they could have improved with the both of them, although I'd say I enjoyed them both. But yeah, I think there is this... But then again, I just sort of feel like There are so many much worse big Western titles which have gotten ridiculous amounts of praise. It's just sort of this weird thing to me that I can like look at something like Red Dead 2 or God of War, the new one, and easily pick out like major gameplay issues I have with them. Last of Us, I think everyone's kind of avoided talking about the gameplay because it's just very solid, and that people would rather sort of pretend it isn't there or that it's not worth discussing. So most of the focus has kind of gone onto the story or the level of violence in it, which to me is just a big fat non-issue when it comes to the level of violence or the goofy ass sex scene. Once again, I think the sex scene thing just plays into people being mad at Sony's Japan censorship policy, which I agree is some fucking bullshit. If you don't know how it works, it basically amounts to, if you're in Japan and you make a game for the PlayStation 4, Sony want you to get it covered by some sensitivity group that work over in the States. And this seems to exclusively apply to Japan. It leads to some really weird cuts. Developers have complained about it. You need to at least have an English speaker to put it through it, sort of to send stuff off. They can sometimes apparently reject you for unclear reasons. It's stupid, but a lot of the reasoning given has kind of been Japanese sexual content. Now, people tend to blow this off as a non-issue, but I'm gonna throw my hat into a controversial place and say I can actually understand where Sony's coming from, even though I really think their way of dealing with it is insanely shitty. You see, I had this argument on Twitter where someone legit argued that unlocking a hidden shower scene with a prepubescent girl was the exact same thing as The Last of Us 2 having a sex scene, and if you weren't happy with that, you're a hypocrite. And also that being able to have sex with characters who are meant to be 8 years old, which rewards you with like pin-up style models of characters with plot spoilers. They're actually like, they've got the minds of 20-somethings, but their bodies are 8 years old. Even the game itself states that's what they're in. So you can fucking match those characters up and a lot bit. That stuff is why Sony probably went and pulled this goofy ass stunt. Now my take is Sony should simply just state that as a universal ban on its system. If you want to have that stuff in there, you can't on our Sony system. Both these things are the responsibility of that Danganronpa team. I know about them because I play that studio's games. They have a weird obsession with their games tend to be very fan servicey in certain ways. It's funny in its own way, because I had a debate with the sort of guy who probably watches someone like H-Bomber Guy about this in a pub. Well, I know he watches H-Bomber Guy, he brought it up. This was in Bristol, the Bristol community, I guess. And he was mostly complaining about the sexualisation of, not of, grown women in those games, but I just thought it was funny that he didn't seem to go on about the fact that you've got prepubescence in there. But that's sort of my take. The Last of Us, people seem to also argue that it's like pornographic, and I don't think people know what pornographic means if that's the case. Like The Last of Us 2's sex scene, if you call it pornographic, I mean it's graphic, but there's a big difference. This is a debate I have a lot, largely around people like Shadman, who like to also enjoy sexualizing minors and like to put it all under the banner of satire. And then you have people legit arguing that how can you say what is actually sexualized and what is, and it's like. People do that for a job. There's a whole there's a reason some things can get away with showing child nudity and some things can't. There's a very clear line between what is sexualized and what is not. Now, personally, I think drawings are in a very different category, but I don't at all begrudge Sony for wanting to get rid of this stuff. I just think the way they did it was some horseshit. Now, let's go on to... I think I'm going to have to just bow on. I'm not going to talk about the whole story. I'm just going to talk about the character of Abby, because that's where a lot of the backlashes came in. Now, I think what The Last of Us really wanted to do with her was to make a sort of female action star who could realistically look like she could beat up like a grown man in hand-to-hand combat, which most female characters in video games don't look like they could. This is where I've gotten into some arguments, and I've heard some insanely terrible responses which I think miss the core point. It's like Samus could beat up a dude because she's half alien, or Tifa has material. It's like that's kind of missing the point. Isn't whether or not they have superpowers. Like Supergirl, a baby can beat up a grown man if a baby has like superpowers. It's whether you look at their appearance, their actual intended appearance, not some fan art or some only semi-official artwork from years back, which isn't how they're generally portrayed in games. People try and do that with Samus, where they drag out this one pic from Nintendo Power, which, you might as well go out and try and claim that Link is meant to look like he looks in the CDI games if you're going to go that far. And even then, she still doesn't look that tough. Not as tough as Abby, that's for sure. But that's why I think they went with that appearance. Now, my honest feeling is this is some... there's a lot of what I like to call, like, backpedaling and trying to find excuses for why people hate this. Now, I think saying she looks ugly, I don't want to fuck her, is a perfectly legit reason to say I don't want to play as this character. I would much sooner have people do that than do the whole logic own thing and pretend they have a logical reason why this sort of breaks their immersion. See, people bring up these excuses which come across like they haven't actually played the game. Once again, it's Chinese whispers and they're going off word of mouth. So they're like, well, how can she be this buff in the post-apocalypse? It's like she's... In The Last of Us setting, there are a ton of cities with full-on power, gyms, populations, food, all that stuff, farmland, etc. It's not Mad Max. I mean, at that point, you might as well start crying. Why in Mad Max does everyone have oil but no water? It's like, it doesn't really matter personally, but if you want it, Last of Us provides the explanation pretty easily. Then people actually go as far. I've seen people go as far as to argue that this whole concept of like just the whole cities, gyms shouldn't happen in a zombie apocalypse, which is just silly. It's just this desperate like, this isn't working, so I want to pretend the whole zombie sort of genre needs to take place in a setting where everyone is starving and it's borderline third world. And even in that third world setting, there can't be any rich warlords who have all the meat, food and guns they could desire. It's that stupid, why can vampires sparkle in Twilight? It's because vampires aren't real, dumbass. So then you get that, and then you get people just desperately trying to claim that, like, well, they're suddenly experts on nutrition and bodybuilding. It's like, it's done enough to explain it. Like, just back the fuck off. You're not making, as far as I'm concerned, you're desperately grasping at straws. Now, I think this is a common thing for people to do. It's like when you had that whole stupid controversy over that Batgirl cover, because people didn't want to admit, oh, I just don't like it because it's like a female character in distress, and that really upsets me. They had to pretend like, oh, they would never put Batman in distress on a cover, which is obviously false, but the point is just to drag on whatever thing you can find to try and make your case and to change it when you need to. I guess I should talk about the other reasons people hate this character, which is the claim that she's kind of this, I guess I'll say Mary Sue. Now, I don't like the term Mary Sue. I don't like any feminist frequency dumbed tropes, tropes, bullshit talk. I find it really irritating. I don't care if it's a woman in a refrigerator. I'm like, sometimes you kill characters off well, sometimes you don't. As far as I'm concerned, Last of Us killing off Joel was fine, but there are plenty of examples I could give where things have killed off characters in ways I think are kind of convoluted. And there are plenty of characters who I think are overly idealised and the story tends to like more than the storyline really should. I don't think Abby applies to that, so I think the response has been partly that she's inherently the villain because she killed off Joel. And both Abby and Ellie are pretty morally dubious characters. All the playable characters in The Last of Us have been morally dubious. Joel, according to his backstory, you can imply he's probably murdered people in the past. It's not like... certain things are vague, but it's never really had a playable character who didn't have some skeletons. But yeah, Abby's murder of Joel is motivated by the ending of the first game. The first game had this big twist ending where it turned out the whole thing is Joel has to take Ellie across this, across America to drop her off at the Fireflies, who are like this fairly powerful sort of military organisation which are working on a cure. They've got food, they've got doctors, they've got scientists, and they think they can cure the epidemic because Ellie is immune. So Joel has to travel across America, get her there. During the course of her adventure, they sort of bond, and it becomes sort of a father-daughter thing. And then, when he reaches it, it turns out that in order to make the cure, Ellie's probably going to have to be chopped up on, like, the medical board. She's going to die. So Joel kills a bunch of the Fireflies, most of them I'd say, I'm not sure, I don't remember that exact detail, and some of the doctors, and saves Ellie, and then lies to her and says, now because she's unconscious during the whole thing, she just goes, we didn't, they have a bunch of other people who are immune, we were just told, we might as well go. And it's an ambiguous ending. That's the idea. It's like which one was the good guy, which side was the right one. And I think people have taken this to be The Last of Us 1 was completely pro Joel, and then 2 spits on him by suggesting that what he did might be bad. Once again, I'm saying in this fictional story needs to apply to my personal fan theory stuff, which is that the Fireflies would have killed her for no reason. They wouldn't have found the cure. Therefore, Abby wanting revenge for Joel murdering her father along with a bunch of her friends is just evil, which is stupid. First of all, it's a zombie apocalypse story where the zombies aren't even zombies at this point. They're fucking massive abominations in certain cases. And they wouldn't have found a cure. This is a betrayal. It's like they all. It's, to be fair, I don't think the game ever makes it 100% clear whether it would have worked or not, but it generally suggests they thought it had a good chance of. So yeah, Abby has some understandable reasons for wanting to murder Joel. What's interesting about Abby's side of the story is they kind of make her a mirror to Joel, more so than Ellie, really. Like, her storyline basically concerns her, she's with the Wolves, which are basically ex-Fireflies. They're a pretty brutal and fairly unpleasant group of survivors, but then once again, this is kind of The Last of Us, and their rivals are also insane religious zealots, so once again, no real clear good side here. During the first sort of main chapter where you play as her, she ends up getting caught by a bunch of these religious zealot characters. They're like cultists. I heard early rumours said they would be homophobic Christians. It turned out no, they're just generic cults. There's not even that, like, slightly cowardly, let's throw Christian imagery in here, but not actually call them Christians stuff. They're just a cult. They worship some, some woman they think is a prophet or something. And during Abby's story, she gets caught by them, but then she's sort of partly saved by two other members of the cult who are on the run, a sister and what initially appears to be a brother. And it's because it turns out the brother is actually a girl, and this is where you get all this, like, is it trans or is it not, whatever stuff. I'm not going to go on about that. But he, whatever, was going to be married to one of the cult members, one of the, like, elders or whatever, and they're, like, fucking 10 or something. So, his sister's trying to save him, and they still believe in whatever the religious stuff is, but they want to get away from the cult. So Abby has to help him out. And the storyline basically, it ends up being similar to Joel. She travels with this kid on an adventure. I don't think it works quite as well as the Joel Ellie thing, just because it's a much smaller portion of the game. But it sort of mirrors that in that at her end, she's faced with having to turn against the wolves, the ex-Fireflies, to save this kid, or betray them and kill a bunch of them and fight back against the people she was initially on the side of. And there you go. It's a circle, whatever. You can complain that it's poorly done or whatever. I've said before, I don't think it's good as the Last of Us 1's story, but I'm talking about a small portion of Last of Us 2 rather than the whole of Last of Us 1, so I don't think it's a fair comparison. So there we go. That's the Abby storyline. Ellie also mirrors Abby in that she tortures and horribly murders one of Abby's friends at one point. She also accidentally kills a pregnant woman, semi-accidentally, I guess. It's a bit of a spur of the moment brawl, and then she goes through with it. Lots of edgy shit happens, and at the end, Ellie loses technically twice to Abby in fights. One's not really a fight. Eventually, Abby gets caught by this other group. She's loses all her muscle, is like a prisoner, is starved. Ellie finds her, beats the shit out of her, and lets her live, because I always interpreted that as like, okay, Ellie kind of she finds out about the whole Joel thing, and part of the whole point of Joel's death being kind of tragic is that over the course of the game, during flashbacks, you kind of learn her and Joel, Ellie and Joel, on kind of shitty terms before the end. So there we go. Abby gets to live, but as sort of a bit of a husk of what she once was. Definitely not the bodybuilder look she had at the start, but she escapes with her kid. Ellie comes home and has lost mostly everything, including some fingers. Everyone's unhappy. I thought the game was very good. Goodbye.